For on the 8th of the month of Zakiri, on the night of Tuesday, I had the following dream in the morning. There seemed to be a big temple, the back portion of which was slightly damaged. When I entered the temple, there were several idols in it. These idols were seeing like human beings, and their eyes were in motion. When I approached them, I noticed the idols of two women. One of them spoke to me.
In the year 1799, the British stormed Srirangapatna, the fortress of one of their most formidable enemies ever on the soil of Hindustan, Tipu Sultan. Amidst the enormous loot and plunder of the Sultan's palace, they discovered something extraordinary from Tipu's personal chambers, a secret diary. The Book of Dreams, a personal journal where Tipu Sultan meticulously recorded and interpreted his dreams. Almost a century before Freud explored dream psychology, this Muslim ruler seems to be mapping the landscapes of his subconsciousness. From 1785 to 1798, Tipu recorded and wrote interpretations of 37 of his dreams in this diary. When the British colonel Kirkpatrick discovered this book, one of Tipu's munshis told him that Tipu manifested peculiar anxiety to hide this diary from the eyes of anyone who happened to approach while he was writing or reading from it. Let's look at the life of the tiger of Mysore from the prism of this dream book, and also try to find out what happened next when this Muslim Sultan came across a Hindu goddess in one of the dreams. The kingdom of Mysore was once a subsidiary of the Vijayanagar Empire, ruled by the Wodeyar dynasty for centuries. But everything changed after the empire's collapse at the Battle of Talikota in 1565. In 1610, Raja Wodeyar declared Mysore's independence, establishing Srirangapatna as its capital. Srirangapatna literally means the city of Holy Ranga. The giant supine Lord Ranganath Swami resting on the majestic Adisesha serpent. Haider Ali and his brother must have been mere teenagers whose father had recently died when around 1730 their mother begged the reigning Mysore Maharaja to take her and her children under the Mysore wing. It was not unusual for Wodeyars to have Muslim commanders in their army, and hence when Haider came of age, he joined the army of Wodeyars. But Haider Ali was no ordinary soldier. He was destined for greatness. Rising rapidly through the ranks, he became the commander of the Mysore army by the late 1750s. While his military career flourished, Haider's personal life faced some challenges. 4 years into his marriage with Fatima Begum, they remained childless. This is when they visited the dargah of a Sufi saint named Tipu Mastan Aulia in Arcot. Their prayers were answered, and in 1750 a son was born in Devanhalli near Bangalore. They named him Tipu, after the saint of the Arcot Dargah who had blessed them. By 1760, Mysore was nominally ruled by Krishnaraj Wodeyar too. And real power lay with his courtiers, Nanjraja and Devaraja. Haider, leveraging his influence in the army, sidelined them and established himself as the de facto ruler, while keeping a Wodeyar figurehead on the throne to maintain legitimacy. Haider understood power's subtle art, keeping a Hindu king on the throne while ruling from the shadows. The latter part of the 18th century was a time of great turmoil in the Indian subcontinent. The British, emboldened by their victories at Plassey and Buxar, sought to expand their territories between the strongholds of Calcutta and Madras. This threatened Mysore, and hence Haider decided to resist. Haider and Tipu descended on the Carnatic from the west and laid siege to Arcot, whose Nawab had a treaty with the British. Hector Munro, the British general who had beaten Awadh and Bengal Nawabs in Buxar with an English army half their size, dug in at Kanchipuram with a force of around 5,000 men. Another 1,200 strong force under British Colonel Bailey travelled south from Guntur to meet Munro's force at Kanchipuram. While Haider stayed at Arcot, Tipu went eastwards to prevent the two British forces from meeting at Kanchipuram. It is here, at the village of modern Pollilur or Pollilur, that a battle of a great historical magnitude took place. A battle that would prove to be the last major battle on the subcontinent soil where a Hindustani power humiliated the British. After this battle, the British learned that the days are past when they could beat the Indian native armies like they did in Plassey and Buxar, with the sheer discipline and tactics of their small forces. This great victory was immortalized in this fresco on the walls of Darya Daulat Bagh in Srirangapatnam. Here, the English general is seen sucking his thumb in a palki, while Haider and Tipu ride on elephants. The French garrison of Haider is also shown prominently. Not only this, a hand-colored French painting from 1783 even shows Haider Ali spanking a British general with a twig, while French soldier provides him with the twigs. The victory at Pollilur was a devastating blow to the British morale and resources. 1 in 4 British officers in India at that time was captured by Haider's forces. Financially, the war drained the British East India Company, and many British contemporaries sitting in Madras and Calcutta believed that had Haider pressed his advantage, British rule in India might have ended then and there.
Last night I saw a strange creature in my dreams. Looks like my army had encamped after a day of march when I saw a cow with its calf. Its skin was that of a tiger, but its forelegs were that of a cow. It had no hinder legs at all, yet its forelegs were in slight motion. I told my attendants that when I reach this cow that looked like a tiger, I shall with my own hand cut it into 2. Soon I woke up. The following interpretation of the dream suggested itself. The Nazarenes are this cow with an appearance of a tiger. The motion of forelegs I interpreted to mean that they would make an attempt to wage war, and the absence of hinder legs meant that no one would offer them any help. Through the aid of God, be it so.
In the year 1783, Haider dies of a tumor on his back, and Tipu ascends the throne of Mysore. Unlike his father, Tipu felt no need to continue the pretense of keeping a Wodeyar ruler as a figurehead king. He declared himself as the sole ruler and named his administration Sarkar-e-Khuda-Dad, the government of God. In contrast to his father Haider, Tipu lacked the diplomatic finesse that could have secured allies. His frequent raids into the territories of the Marathas and the Nizam alienated both powers. Alarmed by Tipu's aggression and capabilities, they joined forces with the British in 1789, forming a triple alliance. At the helm of the British campaign was Governor-General Lord Cornwallis, a man with a score to settle. Just 8 years earlier, Cornwallis had been forced to surrender to George Washington at Yorktown. Now he sought redemption on the battlefields of Hindustan. In February 1791, Marcus Cornwallis charged out of Madras at the head of an army of 19,000 sepoys. By March, Bangalore had fallen, and the Nizam's cavalry joined Cornwallis' ranks. But the Sultan was no ordinary adversary. Understanding the strategic limitations of his opponents, Tipu deployed a ruthless scorched earth strategy. He systematically destroyed fields, killed transport bullocks, and created logistical nightmares for the advancing army. Cornwallis' grand campaign began to unravel. Supplies dwindled rapidly, troops fell sick, and early arrival of monsoon destroyed rice rations and decimated morale. It was only through the timely arrival of a Maratha army of 12,000 that the allied forces were saved from complete disaster. By May, Cornwallis was forced into a humiliating retreat, a failure so profound that British political cartoonists mercilessly mocked his ineffectiveness. 2 months later, the British regrouped. Joined once again by the Marathas and the Nizam's forces, Cornwallis marched on Srirangapatnam in February 1792. The city, an island fortress, became the stage for a massive siege. Cornered and surrounded, Tipu was compelled to negotiate. Cornwallis accepted, but his terms were severe. Tipu must surrender half his kingdom and pay an indemnity of 30 million rupees, release his prisoners of war, and give his 2 eldest sons as hostages to guarantee full payment. The treaty also stripped Mysore of significant territories. The Marathas took lands near their border, the Nizam gained areas adjoining Hyderabad, and the British acquired regions in the Eastern Ghats, Coorg, and the spice-rich Malabar coast. The treaty was finally signed, and the 2 young princes, Abdul Khalik, who was 8, and Mujjuddin, aged 5, handed over to Cornwallis on 18 March 1792.
It seemed to me that 3 silver trays of fresh dates known as ratab were brought and placed before me. They were fresh and full of juice. This servant of God interpreted the dream as follows: that the 3 trays were representing the Marathas, Nizam, and the British, and by the grace of merciful God the dominions and homes of all these 3 Kafirs shall fall into my hands.
Tipu saw the colonizing British as an existential threat to his land. But Tipu was not one to admit defeat. If the Hindustani powers, the Marathas and the Nizam would not aid him in driving out the British, he would turn to allies across the seas. In 1787, Tipu sent ambassadors to the French King Louis XVI, requesting 10,000 French soldiers for a 10-year campaign against the British. Around the same time, he reached out to the Ottoman Caliph in Constantinople, appealing for support. After his crushing defeat in 1792, Tipu sent another embassy to France, and in 1797, he reached out to Zaman Shah Abdali in Kabul, the grandson of Ahmad Shah Abdali. To the Islamic powers, Ottomans, Persians, and Afghans, Tipu appealed through the passionate rhetoric of pan-Islamism. To the French, he highlighted their shared antipathy towards the British. In early 1797, a French privateer named Francois Fidel Ripaud lands in Bangalore. He makes his way to Srirangapatnam and claims to represent France. Moreover, he says 10,000 men are ready to come from Mauritius and help Tipu in defeating the British. Desperate for any chance to reclaim his power, Tipu went against the advice of his courtiers and sent a secret embassy to meet the Governor-General of Mauritius, Anne Joseph Malartic, in early 1798. But when Tipu's envoys arrived, they learned the truth. Ripaud had deceived them. Malartic admitted he had only 200 men to spare. To make matters worse, Malartic violated the embassy's secrecy by issuing a public proclamation to recruit men for Tipu's war. This public proclamation was the first domino in a chain of events that would seal Tipu's fate. But back in India, the proclamation issued by Malartic had already reached British Governor-General Richard Wellesley in Calcutta. In June 1798, Wellesley read the news in a local newspaper. It is said that at that moment he had resolved that Tipu Sultan had to be eliminated to secure British dominance in India. By March 1799, Wellesley stood at the gates of Srirangapatnam with a combined British and army of the Nizam. On May 4, around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, British forces breached the fort's northwestern walls and poured into the city. Upon hearing of the assault, Tipu left his palace mid-meal and rode to the breach with his allied Lion of God battalion. But the enemy had already overrun the walls. Tipu fought valiantly, taking on overwhelming numbers of British troops. He received 2 bayonet wounds and a musket shot to the shoulder before making his final stand between the water gate and the inner ramparts. In his last moments, a British grenadier attempted to snatch a gold buckle from Tipu's waist. The Sultan struck the soldier down with his sword, only to be shot moments later at point-blank range. After 4 wars against the company over a period of 32 years, the tiger of Mysore finally fell, sword in hand, among the heaps of dead and dying men. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Lord Wellesley, raising a glass when the news of Tipu's death was brought to him, "I drink to the corpse of India." And he was not wrong. The British never found an equal in India after Tipu. Hardly 4 years had passed after Tipu fell that the Marathas found themselves entirely subjugated by the British.
For on the 8th of the month of Zakiri, on the night of Tuesday, I had the following dream in the morning. There seemed to be a big temple, the back portion of which was slightly damaged. When I entered the temple, there were several idols in it. These idols were seeing like human beings, and their eyes were in motion. When I approached them, I noticed the idols of 2 women. One of them spoke to me.
"We are only 2 Devis here, while rest of the idols are Devas. We have been praying to God for a long time, and everyone ought to nourish oneself."
I said to her, "That is fine, keep yourself occupied with the remembrance of God." Having said that, I ordered my men to repair the temple, and in the meantime I woke up.